Less Taken contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Less Taken.
The moon hangs low, a gray orb casting a faint glow over what's known as Potter's Field in Westland, Michigan. The night is still, save for the rustling of leaves. Shadows peer between the grave markers, and light dances in the dark. Two teenagers, hearts pounding with adrenaline, ignore a no trespassing sign and slip through a set of weathered gates. They move with the stealth of the shadows. The girl clutches the boy's hand, her other hand tracing the cold, rough edges of the numbered bricks as they pass. A sudden chill descends upon them, colder than the autumn air warrants. The boy stops, his eyes fixed on a faint figure standing by a distant grave, a figure that wasn't there moments ago. It's barely more than a wisp of mist, yet human in form, no doubt.
Did you see that?
The girl whispers. Before the boy can answer, their attention is stolen by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Both of them immediately think, police. The teens freeze, eyes wide with panic. The beam of a flashlight cuts through the darkness, and the silhouette of a police officer emerges from the patrol car.
Hey, who's there?
The officer calls out, his voice firm and authoritative. The ghostly figure drifts away and vanishes, as if the earthly concerns of the living have no hold on it. The teenagers, their attention snapped back to the immediate danger of being caught, move toward the tree line, holding their breath as the officer's flashlight sweeps over their hiding spot. The officer, his words answered only by the wind, shrugs to himself and walks back to his car. With a final scan of the area, he gets into the vehicle and drives away. The teenagers wait until the red taillights fade into the night. The couple stands up from their hiding place, a mix of relief and exhilaration washing over them. As they make their way out, the vastness of the cemetery becomes apparent. There are rows upon rows of small graves, haphazardly sprung about in many parts, and most of them, nearly all 7,100 of them, are unmarked and unclaimed. You're listening to Eloise, the fifth story from Less Taken, Season 3. In this episode, we go beyond Potter's Field in Westland, Michigan to explore the horrific history and legends behind Eloise Asylum. Please let us know what you think of this episode when you're done by leaving a fair rating and review wherever you're listening. You can also submit your reviews at our website, lesstakenpod.com. Not only can you review the show at our website, but you can also write to us, as well as suggest ideas for future episodes. The website itself has gotten a bit of a facelift, so be sure to check it out, as well as our new medium roast coffee called Witch's Grave. Try it out and save $1 with the code Eloise at checkout. And be sure to follow us before we follow you on Facebook and Instagram under the handle @lesstakenpod for additional media, early previews, and more. I'm CM Humphreys, and this is Less Taken, real-life horror stories from the Midwest. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy Eloise. where the two teenagers encounter something otherworldly, as well as the police, is a vast cemetery known as Potter's Field, one that hosts over 7,100 grave sites. Unlike most cemeteries, though, these aren't your typical headstones with epitaphs. Instead, nearly every last one of them is simply a numbered brick in the ground. From there are actually two cemeteries that eventually come together to make up what's known, quite generically, as Potter's Field in Westland, Michigan. And this cemetery continues to add new numbered bricks until around 1948. The main reason for the numbered graves is that many of the deceased patients do not have close relatives or friends to claim or identify them at the time of their deaths. As the years pass, many records are lost, disappear, or destroyed. Although there are groups that wish to identify every last person buried in Potter's Field, this is a task that will most likely never be realized. The best record book anyone's uncovered only goes over the deaths from 1926 to 1948, and less than 1% of the deceased are named. It's not just the poor record keeping that makes the task so arduous. It's also how the patients are buried. Real estate is limited, as are resources, so many of the bodies are buried haphazardly, with some of the bodies stacked on top of each other. After years of decay, not even DNA samples will do much good. One more thing to consider is that Eloise isn't just one hospital. The complex has a poorhouse, an infirmary division, a general hospital, a sanitarium, and the infamous psychiatric division known as Eloise Asylum. In essence, Eloise isn't a hospital, it's an entire city. There's food, housing, schooling, everything. Those who work at the Eloise complex, and those who are admitted, never seem to leave. It's even self-governed and protected by its own police force and fire departments. As for the cemetery, they have a special unit to help dispose of the bodies as they come along. This unit isn't just made out of hospital staff and workers, but also other patients. Perhaps even more controversial than having patients bury other patients, are the treatments they receive at Eloise. The corridors of Eloise Hospital Psychiatric Division are dimly lit, the flickering lights casting long shadows on the peeling paint of the walls. A patient, a young woman with a distant gaze, is led down the hallway by a nurse. Her steps are hesitant, her hands trembling slightly as she clutches the fabric of her gown. Part of her wants to run away. Maybe she's not crazy. Maybe this place is crazy. But she knows any attempt to do so will be futile. She's heard stories about those who have dared to run off. The young woman and the nurse arrive at a stark room, the scent of antiseptic heavy in the air. The young woman notices a clutter of machinery. One of the devices looks like a wooden chest, but has two wires of some sort coming out of it, thin white pads at each end. The nurse helps the patient onto a padded table, straps securing her limbs. She can't help but stare at the wooden box for a few more seconds. The young woman hopes, whatever it is, it's not for her. No one mentioned electricity. They said something about some kind of medicine, though. Something to do with sugar. The woman's breath quickens, her chest rising and falling in rapid succession. Along with whispers of escape and punishment, the young woman has also heard murmurs regarding the treatment she is about to receive. The name comes to her now: insulin shock therapy. Fear coils in her stomach, like a living entity of its own, ready to burst out from within, through her flesh, and onto the grimy, tiled floor. A doctor enters, his white coat a glaring contrast to the dreariness of the room. He offers a reassuring smile, though it doesn't quite reach his eyes.
We're only here to help you,
He says, his voice a practiced sort of calm. He doesn't maintain eye contact as he utters those 5 words. They either mean nothing to him, or he's being evasive about what's truly at play here. He prepares a syringe with some sort of clear liquid. The young woman turns her head, looking out of a small barred window. She wonders what life is like outside of the hospital. She's been here so long, she can hardly remember. There's really not much to see outside of the few small windows along the hospital. It's mostly a view of other buildings, like the bakery or the fire station. As the needle pierces the young woman's skin, she feels a cold rush, her entire world beginning to spin and blur around her. Her thoughts scattered, disjointed and fleeting, as the insulin takes hold. The room fades away, and she's adrift in a sea of darkness. She's falling into an abyss where time and reality lose their meaning. Beyond that, time and reality aren't even a consideration. It's a place of shadows, a place of echoes. The young woman isn't sure if she's awake, asleep, or dying. The treatment itself is a gamble, a desperate attempt to reset a mind that doctors deem broken. As the young woman succumbs to the induced coma, the staff watches over her, waiting for the moment she'll awaken. They hope for a miracle. They hope she returns to some sort of clarity. Simply put, they hope they're right. But the outcome is uncertain. So they wait. And they wait. And they wait. Eloise Asylum begins its journey as the Wayne County poorhouse in the 1830s. It's initially established to provide care for the poor, mentally ill, and those with nowhere else to go. Over time, it expands its services and facilities, eventually evolving into one of the largest mental health facilities in the entire United States. At its height, Eloise Asylum is a bustling, self-sufficient complex that houses over 10,000 patients. In addition to the emergency departments and buildings, this hospital city is complete with its own farm too. While the complex can boast many successes, some of its standards and practices are called into question. Eloise Asylum is known for its use of treatments that are often controversial and soon become outdated. Some of these treatments include electroshock therapy, also known as electroconvulsive therapy. This treatment involves sending electric currents through the brain to trigger a brief seizure to provide a patient relief from mental health conditions. Next, there's hydrotherapy. Patients are subjected to water treatments, which range from being sprayed with water to being submerged in baths for extended periods of time, sometimes in extreme temperatures. Lastly, as explored before, is insulin shock therapy. This involves administering large doses of insulin to induce comas in patients, with the belief that it can treat things like schizophrenia and other psychiatric disorders. Many of these treatments are seen as revolutionary at first. They read well on paper, but the data behind them is flawed, and more often than not, these controversial treatments garner less than desirable results. Two young self-described paranormal investigators, Alex and Jamie, are granted an opportunity to explore the barren hallways of Eloise Asylum. As they enter one room, a decent-sized wooden crate catches Jamie's eyes. Next, he spots a weathered chair with thick leather straps. This has to be the electroconvulsive therapy room. Jamie nudges Alex, signaling that he wants to get a closer look at the equipment. He barely moves 1 foot forward when he swears the chair starts to shake. Before them, a spectral figure sits in an abandoned chair, her form flickering in and out of existence. As the investigators watch, the ghostly woman's body convulses sporadically, her limbs jerking with unseen currents. Her eyes are wide and black and hollow, a haunting expression of perpetual shock. The air around her hums with the residual energy of the machine that once buzzed with life. Slowly, Jamie reaches out and says,
Are you in pain?
The ghost's mouth opens in a silent cry, her hands clenching and unclenching, as if gripped by the ghost of electrodes. Then, as suddenly as it began, all the commotion stops. She looks at the investigators, her eyes conveying a century of suffering in a single glance. Alex feels a shiver run down his spine, not from the cold, but from the realization that they are, perhaps, witnessing a spirit trapped in a loop of its darkest moments. The ghostly woman raises a hand, pointing to a name etched faintly on the wall. Perhaps her identity, perhaps some sort of plea for remembrance. The investigators nod, acknowledging her presence and her pain. They promise silently to tell her story. The problem is, they're not completely sure which name she's pointing to, and it hardly matters since all of the names have faded over time and are now illegible. Eloise Asylum, during its time, is considered a pioneer in various medical fields, not just psychiatry, and it has its own medical and nursing schools. It's renowned for its progressive treatments during its early years and is a beacon of hope for many families with nowhere else to turn. As the decades pass, the reputation of Eloise Asylum begins to tarnish. Reports of overcrowding have become rampant, with facilities meant for fewer patients being pushed to their limits. This leads to unsanitary conditions where diseases are easily spread and neglect where individual care for patients dwindles due to sheer volume. Eloise's downfall continues with the introduction of controversial treatments such as the aforementioned ECT, hydrotherapy, and insulin shock therapy. These treatments, though considered innovative at a time, will be later viewed as inhumane and contribute to the darker side of the institution's history. Eloise Asylum ultimately shuts down due to a combination of factors, including deinstitutionalization, changes in mental health care practices, and financial constraints. The deinstitutionalization movement in the mid-20th century leads to a shift away from large psychiatric hospitals towards community-based mental health services. This movement is driven by the development of new psychiatric medications, which make it possible for many patients to live independently or in less restrictive environments. Additionally, the conditions at Eloise Asylum, like many other similar institutions, worsens over time. The farm operations cease in 1958, and some of the larger psychiatric buildings are vacated in 1973. The psychiatric division starts closing in 1977, and the last patients are transferred out in 1982 when the state of Michigan takes over. The General Hospital closes in 1986. Even though the Eloise complex completely shuts down, it leaves behind more than a rich and sometimes dark history and a few crumbling buildings. Not everything was taken, and some say not everyone left. In front of a group of local teenagers stands the dilapidated facade of Eloise Asylum, only visible in slivers of moonlight. They've had friends get busted by bored police officers before, but they're all fueled by curiosity and the allure of a dare. Without much forethought, they breach the perimeter, their laughter and chatter shattering the silence of the night. One would think that they're not worried at all about getting caught. They navigate through the overgrowth, the beams of their flashlights dancing over the crumbling walls and broken pathways. One of the young men, Tyler, leads the way to what he believes should be the old hydrotherapy wing. He turns to his friends and whispers,
This is where they did the water treatment.
The air grows colder as they enter the hydrotherapy room. The dirty remnants of tubs and showers look like narrow, endless pits. The teens' voices hush instinctively, a sense of unease settling over them. Suddenly, a soft sound catches their attention. The drip of water. They turn, and there in the corner is the translucent figure of a young man, his ethereal form seated in one of the tubs. He's motionless at first, then begins to shiver violently, his hands gripping the sides of the tub as if he's being subjected to the icy torrents of hydrotherapy once again. His eyes meet theirs, filled with endless depth of sorrow and fear. The figure doesn't speak, only continues to shiver. Tyler reaches out, his hand passing through the apparition, the temperature dropping so sharply it steals his breath away.
We should go.
He stammers.
Like now.
Only 5 of the nearly 80 buildings still stand. The firehouse, power station, commissary, and the D building, also known as the K. Beard building, can still be seen in part today, although they have submitted to years of weathering and decay. At one point, there were actually 6 buildings remaining, but a 2016 arson leaves the bakery in ruins. Much of the land that once belonged to the Eloise complex is turned into apartments, condominiums, and a shopping center. The commissary building is also occupied by the Wayne County Administration until 2016. Eloise now boasts a historic marker. The asylum itself inspires books like Annie's Ghost, A Journey into a Family Secret by Steve Luxenberg, and the film aptly named Eloise in 2017. Paranormal show Expedition X spent some time at Eloise after hearing of its haunting past in 2023. There are critics of such media. Family members of the former occupants claim Eloise was never this ominous place. Instead, it was a lot of people's last chance in life, a place for people without a place to go. The way outdated medical practices are glossed up and glorified. The way teenagers sneak onto the property looking for ghosts. It's all an insult to anyone who spent time at Eloise or knew someone who did. What these critics have a particular disdain for is what's become of the K. Beard building. Today, you can explore the D building for yourself in the form of a high-tech, Hollywood-esque haunted attraction called Eloise Asylum, of course. As for the cemetery or Potter's Field, it too still exists. Assuming you're respectful and don't want to make a scene, you can walk through the pine tree enveloped field and see the numbered grave bricks for yourself. However, much of the grass and underbrush have overgrown, making it not only difficult to identify each gravesite, but also to find them in the first place. Thank you for listening to Eloise, the fifth story from Less Taken, Season 3. Please let us know what you think of this episode by leaving a fair rating and review wherever you're listening. You can also submit your reviews at our website, lesstakenpod.com. Not only can you review the show at our website, but you can also write to us, as well as suggest ideas for future episodes. Once again, the website's gotten a bit of a facelift, and our merch has been refreshed. It's still a work in progress, but be sure to check it out. We now have a medium roast coffee called Witch's Grave up for sale on the site, and you can save $1 by using the code Eloise at checkout. If you truly enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe with auto downloads on and tell a friend. It all truly helps. Follow us before we follow you on Facebook and Instagram under the handle @lesstakenpod for updates, media, and more. On Instagram, we like to drop early samples of our episodes too. One last way to support the show is by buying us a cup of coffee at buymeacupofcoffee.com/lesstakenpod. The link is in the episode notes. A quick note on our storytelling. While we do our best to stick to the facts, we sometimes take creative liberties to maintain narrative cohesiveness. I'm CM Humphreys, and this is Less Taken, real-life horror stories from the Midwest. Once again, thanks for listening, and I hope you join us next Wednesday for a preview of story number 6 from Less Taken, Season 3.
Chase County Productions.